Naz, thank you. Now, as we told you, Keir Starmer today is going to deliver that major speech today, 10 o'clock, issuing a call to arms to his party ahead of a predicted general election this year.
He'll also target the Conservative Party, accusing a succession of PMs of treating politics like a hobby and wielding power for the sake of it.
In the studio with us, TalkTV's political correspondent Alicia Fitzgerald back with us. And also joining us is former advisor to Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, John McTernan. John, good morning to you. Welcome. We're hearing this might be a sort of Blair 2.0. Do you think that's the right tack?
Look, Tony won 3 elections in a row, the most successful Labour Prime Minister ever. There's no harm in copying a winner.
No harm in copying a winner, understandably, but... And I think 97 was when I was most engaged with politics, 27 years ago, and even I was blown away by Blair. I felt that he offered something different. What we would love to know, and I think that the viewers and the listeners would love to know, John, if you've got an inside track on this or an opinion, is, to me, Starmer and Sunak are quite similar, right? There seems to be a complete lack, hear me out, of charisma. Somebody like Blair took people with him. Whatever you say about Johnson, he took people with him. What you say about Thatcher, she took people with him. I still don't know, apart from distancing his party from Corbyn, I still don't know, apart from he stuck up for the Israelis initially and says he won't pay the doctors 35%. He talks about financial balance. I don't know what he's going to give us. That's what I want the Labour Party to tell the British public.
He's going to give us stability.
How?
We've had 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors in 6 years. Keir and Rachel, as Rachel Reeves as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, they'll give us the same leadership team for the first term, for the second term. So you've got a contrast between 5-6 years of absolute turmoil.
John, you know as well as I do. Ideology is one thing. Within 6 months, somebody will have had an affair or dodged their expenses. I'm being completely straight. I'm not being disrespectful to the Labour Party. You and I both know that within 6 months, the top team will be in half because somebody will have been sacked.
When you win,
I want policy.
When you win big, you have the ability to plan for a decade, not just for...
Do you think you'll win big?
I think you'll win. I think you will win big. You're looking at 350, 400 Labour MPs, I reckon. The country wants change. And look, one thing I agree with you is this year is a year in which Labour has to colour in the change it will be. So there are changes in taxation, the VAT on school fees that will go to education, the closing the non-dom loopholes that will go into paying in the health service. But the thing that's different about 96, 97 and now is how grim everything is. When I was doing a health policy for Labour in opposition, our pledge to help the NHS was to have 100,000 extra operations, take 100,000 people off the waiting list. We're now on 8 million people waiting, 7.5 heading to 8 million. The scale of everything is in such a mess, and so there's a realism that has to be. There's so much pressure.
There's a realism that also comes with a really sort of healthy dose of caution that we get from the Labour Party. Alicia, 10 o'clock, lots of us waiting. We're in this slightly bizarre situation where Keir Starmer's going to give his speech, but lots of it's been made public already. So give us sort of the highlights. What can we expect that he's going to say to, as John said, colour in some of those gaps?
Definitely. I don't want to disappoint Jeremy, but this is not a policy-heavy speech.
When are we going to get policy?
Let's find out what he is going to say.
Yeah, so the whole idea of this speech is just about messaging. It's about saying that politics needs a change and that Starmer will be the person to deliver that change. Just really quickly on Jeremy's point earlier about why there hasn't been policy so far. Starmer has had to play a bit of a game here. It's a political game because he knows that the sooner he announces policy, the Conservative government will just jump down his throat and criticise it. And the earlier he does that, the more time there is for the public to actually question the decisions he's making. So he's had to kind of hold out a bit.
Are you conning the public, or is that just politics?
It's sadly, I think that is just the way politics seems to work.
Yeah.
But the issue is now, I think now that we are in the general election year, he will be under a bit more pressure to be a bit more concrete with what exactly is happening. But until this point, he has kind of had no choice but to kind of keep it a bit more under wraps.
I completely agree.
Scrutiny.
And John, don't get me wrong, I've sat here for 2 years and I have to genuinely say that every time a front bench Labour person spokesman comes up, they are polished, they are on message, and many of them have blown the Tories out the water. However, I will say this, I don't think you should underestimate the British public. I don't think you should take it for granted, hear me out, that he is going to waltz in with a 400 majority. What I think the British public will want, whether they're disenfranchised or not, is detail. So my question to you is, first day, up the streets, through number 10, what is Sir Keir Starmer's first job the minute he sits down in number 10 if he wins?
An emergency budget. There's going to have to be a reconstruction of the public finances. Something has to be done to balance the books properly and fairly across everybody. But what the country wants, and don't underestimate the voters, they want, I think, not just change, they want a national exorcism. They want to get rid of this government. They want all trace of it to go. That's why I think in the by-elections you've seen people doing, is it the Liberal or the Labour candidate who's going to be the best to get rid of the Tories? If that happens in a general election, you'll see a wipeout. Now, a blank sheet for Labour coming in, a huge majority. Labour has to start giving hope, reconstructing, but also some sense of it took 14 years, taken 14 years to wreck the country. It'll take at least 10 years to rebuild it.
I don't understand. I'm not... I completely am with you. But are we going to get into a cycle in this country, which is an argument for proportional representation? We all know what Liam Byrne said. There's no money left. We all know that when the Labour Party left power, this country was on its backside. And similarly, I am with you, it's like a tsunami of disasters that have struck this country. Are we going to get into a 10-year cycle of governments that come in and destroy everything the other person's done? And is that what politics is about?
Look, I think the stability thing is really important. And the instability there's been, the chopping and changing, not just of prime ministers, but of actually approaches to managing the economy. Rishi Sunak's been 6 different people, I think, in the last 12 months, just himself. But if you give a proper framework, a realistic one, but actually one which changes and improves over the next 10 years and rebuilds, then actually people, I think, are in for the long haul. I think Cameron and Osborne were right to say we're all in it together. They then proved it wasn't all of us in it together, only a few people were in it. If we, British people are willing to make short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. So if we get the pain and the gain right, I think that's the way Labour can move on.
The essence of your question just there, I think Keir Starmer, Alicia, is going to try and tap into this feeling that British people just feel despair at politics in general rather than the party that they're voting for.
Definitely, and this is the gist of his speech here. It's less about specifically the Labour Party. He's more going to be talking about just how people feel completely hopeless about politics. He's going to reference how people just feel that no politician can actually make a change to anything. And that's a really sad place for a country to be, if people feel like those in charge and those who are running the country, making the decisions, simply cannot change anything that is wrong with it. So that's really what he's going to be tapping into today, and hope to bring round some of those voters who still don't really know where they're going to place their vote.
Alicia, John, thank you both very much.
Thank you both so much indeed for joining us.
That speech at 10 o'clock. So
I can't wait. I'm going to set my alarm.